Ayman Khan here for Seconds Out with incomparable Hall of Fame boxing writer Thomas Hauser. It's been a few weeks actually, so I thought it'd be good to catch up and speak with you. How's life over in the US of A?
Life is good here. I'm actually working on a novel about Sherlock Holmes, which is a great deal of fun. It's been about 10 years since I wrote a novel. And I've done nonfiction quite a bit since then, but I've gone back to fiction now. And when I'm writing a book that's nonfiction, the most fun is in the researching. And by the time I'm ready to write, I tend to say, well, I know all this already, and it can be a bit of a task to put everything down on paper. But when I'm writing a novel, first I do some background research. It's when I actually start writing that the characters come alive and begin talking to me and do things that I had planned for them. So each day I'm going back to 1891 in London and hanging out with Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson, and a bunch of other characters I've created. And I am happiest when I'm working on a book, and that can be fiction like Sherlock Holmes or My Mother and Me, which was the book that came out earlier this year. The reception to that has been very gratifying. In fact, Larry Merchant, HBO's unparalleled expert analyst, expert commentator, whatever you want to call him, said to me recently that he belongs to a book club that is reading My Mother and Me together in August. So that was very gratifying.
Any similarities between well, mothers and Sherlock Holmes in general? I guess they seem to know everything, or at least they find things out a lot quicker than other people do, right?
No, no similarity between the two. In fact, we know from reading the Conan Doyle stories that Sherlock Holmes had a brother named Mycroft who appeared in a few of the stories, but I can't recall Sherlock Holmes's parents ever being mentioned.
Right then, let's get into some of the boxing talk. I wanted to get your take on it's going to be happening 21st of September. Uh, the Saudi Arabian influence is bleeding into different territories, and that has now landed in London, Wembley to be specific. And that's headlined by Anthony Joshua taking on Daniel Dubois. First of all, just about on that Saudi influence spreading into, like I mentioned, those different territories, is this the changing of the guard in a sense of a new generation of boxing that boxing fans can expect because we're getting better fights and better cards because of the influence over from the Saudi region?
I don't know, and I don't think anybody knows. Boxing goes through eras. There was a time when Madison Square Garden essentially called the shots on what happened to boxing. Then the Las Vegas casinos came in and were getting every big fight they wanted. After that, HBO had primacy. For a period, Premier Boxing Champions did. The Zone tried to make a move, but came up very short from the start. Now these Saudis are putting a lot of money, billions and billions of dollars, it appears, into boxing. And people talk about, oh, we're getting such great fights. This is wonderful boxing. I have a dissenting view, which is yes, some of these fights are nice fights, but fans are being asked to reach into their pocket and pay large amounts of money to see them. And that's not how you make a sport great. Wimbledon is going on now. I don't know how things play out in the UK, but over here, nobody has to pay to watch Wimbledon. We can see it on what used to be called regular terrestrial television. Now, I guess everybody has cable. But the point is, boxing is still cut off from mainstream fans. It's unfortunate. Moving to Joshua and Dubois, I think that it's a nice fight. It's an intriguing fight. Will I pay, $79.99 or $49.99 or whatever they charge for it here? Absolutely not. I'll watch it on YouTube an hour after it's over. It's a good fight. To me, one of the disgraceful things about it is that the IBF has stripped Alexander Usyk of his belt So this isn't even for what one might call the undisputed heavyweight championship of the world. That's bad for boxing. Sports thrive on their champions, whether it's the NBA playoffs, which just ended, and we know now the Boston Celtics are NBA champions, will crown a Wimbledon champion in a short period of time. Yeah, there'll be a World Cup champion. Sports want champions, and now we're going to have two heavyweight champions, which is like having two men's singles winners at Wimbledon. And of course, part of the frivolity of it is that Usyk has already beaten Joshua twice, and he knocked Dubois out. So how can one of those men call themselves the heavyweight championship of the world? I don't like it, and to me, it tarnishes what would otherwise be a nice matchup between two solid heavyweights. I actually fancy Joshua in the fight. He is fighting well these days, and I just don't think I don't think Dubois will have the tools to test AJ's heart the way Usyk did twice and Andy Ruiz did once.
Just to further that note that you're, or further that point that you're making before we get into the fight talk, do you feel that boxing fans shouldn't recognize Dubois as champion right now, and further shouldn't recognize the winner as a champion in September?
Well, he's not a champion. He's not going to be a champion. Right now, the heavyweight champion of the world is Alexander Usyk. Now, people tend to forget if one judge had changed one round on his scorecard, the heavyweight champion of the world right now would be Tyson Fury.
Mm.
Again, people tend to forget that, but no. Right now, Usyk is the heavyweight champion, and one could have made an argument, however stretched it might have been, that Ergovic had been the mandatory challenger for a long time, and he was entitled to fight for a belt, but he lost. Dubois has been heavyweight champion for how many months? I mean, and he should be a mandatory now, and Usyk should have to give up part of his crown. I mean, to me, that's just silly. And it might be short-term gain for the promoters and maybe even for the fighters, but it diminishes the whole of the sport.
What of the threat that Dubois poses to Joshua? Now, you've had your say on Joshua in the past and his status within the sport, and Daniel Dubois certainly carries a level of power up at the higher level of the heavyweight division. Do you feel that Daniel has that real dangerous power that can pose the problem to Joshua?
Could Dubois pose problems? Sure, but I think AJ is going to fight a cautious fight.
Hmm.
He's going to dominate with his jab. Now we saw what happened to Dubois when Usyk dominated with his jab. He lost hard. Anthony can bang. I suspect he'll whack him with a couple of right hands. And I think Anthony wins the fight. Could be wrong. I've been wrong before. Uh, Again, it's an intriguing fight. I have no problem with the fight. It's an interesting matchup. To say that it's for the heavyweight championship of the world is demeaning to boxing.
Is it somewhat a little bit of a, or at least the signaling of maybe the change of the guard over here in the UK to a degree? I mean, AJ's somewhat, I guess, the veteran here now. Daniel Dubois, the rising contender. Um, is it the signal of maybe the end of like the Joshua era, especially if he does find himself at the end of a defeat here?
No, because to my way of thinking, none of the young heavyweights have stamped themselves yet as people who are deserving of being on top. Also, let me add that for all the talk of how much the Saudis have done for boxing, the Saudis very quickly could have stopped this stripping. They could have said to Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn, who promote Dubois and Joshua, look, we spent a lot of effort and a lot of money unifying the heavyweight championship for the good of boxing.
Mm.
We don't want it to be unified. So we're telling you right now, if AJ and Dubois fight that fight, and it's for the IBF heavyweight champion of the world, we're not doing business with any of you anymore. And trust me, Alexander's belt would not be stripped under those circumstances. So for whatever reason, the Saudis are going along with it. I think it's unfortunate. Again, good fight, interesting fight, but not for the heavyweight championship of the world.
Have you seen the clip of Dubois and AJ? I think it's somewhat of a throwaway comment there that Dubois said, "Look, we can go now," and AJ really kind of bit onto that and threatened to throw or hit Dubois with a chair and really kind of throw hands right there and then. I'd wonder if you'd seen that clip and what you made of AJ's mentality, having seen that clip, which is somewhat often come into question.
I did not see the clip, so it's really very difficult for me to comment on it. I don't, from what you just told me and what little I've heard about it, I don't like exchanges like that. Jason Tatum and Luka Doncic didn't threaten to hit each other with chairs before the NBA championship final.
Have you seen the back and forth between somewhat rivalry born out of, I don't know, I'm not sure what it is, but Carl Froch and Anthony Joshua as well too, who uh, AJ doesn't seem to take kindly to some of Carl's criticisms, I guess.
I read a little bit about it, and actually, I like both of them. I don't know either of them well. I've met them both casually, but I've read and listened to Carl Froch's comments for a long time. He
Hmm.
speaks his mind, and generally, I agree with what he says. And yeah, well, AJ can't deny that there's an issue here. And if he was the one who was being stripped, he'd probably feel differently about the matter.
It does seem that maybe Anthony Joshua is in the favor with the Saudis. Seems like that he's had for some boxing commenters maybe the easier route to get back to the undisputed or at least back to the heavyweight title contention. Have you seen it that way off of the back of the fights with Helenius, Wallin, and Garnu, contenders who it could have been a tougher path, I guess.
Well, look, that's hard to say. The the Saudis gave Tyson Fury Francis Ngannou, who should have been a very soft touch,
Hmm.
and Fury just partied all his advantages away. And Deontay Wilder fought against two guys who he should have been able to knock out relatively easily and lost to both of them. So yeah, the answer is I don't know. I don't know. Anthony Joshua is a big name. He's enormously popular in the UK. He has roots in Africa and among the Islamic community, where the Saudis are certainly seeking to appeal. So they're doing what they're doing. Again, it's a reasonably good fight. I won't pay to watch it on pay-per-view, but at some point I'll watch it.
Since we last spoke, Tyson Fury had been in the headlines, and it was for a video that surfaced of him coming out of a pub, somewhat enjoying himself, I guess, a bit too much, and it caused some worry amongst boxing fans and pundits alike regarding his health heading into the future rematch between himself and Alexander Usyk. He's since come out and said, "Look, it was just a blowout for myself, which I needed, and don't need to worry about me. Don't need to put the context of my past in. I'm fine, and I'm ready for the rematch with Usyk." Had you seen that video? Had it caused you reason for concern?
I have not seen the video. I heard about it. Look, lots of us go through trying times, and not everybody goes into a pub and gets wasted and comes staggering out. This is how Tyson Fury chose to deal with the pressure on him at that point in time. I would expect that it's not the only time. And being a champion isn't just about what you do on the night of the fight. It's about how you maintain your body all through the year so you have a superior instrument to face your opponent. I remember a conversation with John McEnroe quite a while ago. This was when uh, Rafael Nadal, Roger Federer, and Novak Djokovic were a trio on top of the tennis world. Djokovic hadn't separated himself from the others yet. And John McEnroe, of course, his prime was the greatest tennis player in the world. He was the one who knocked Bjorn Borg off that throne.
Hmm.
And I asked John, if you were playing tennis today and you had to play guys like Federer and Nadal, Djokovic, how do you think you'd do? And John, with great candor, said, I'd probably win 1 or 2 games a set. And then he explained, look, the equipment is different today, but let's assume that I learned how to master the equipment. There's still the matter of our bodies. You know, when I played tennis before the final at the US Open or Wimbledon or whatever, I'd have a steak and pasta. These guys calibrate what they put into their bodies 365 days a year. They work with physical conditioners and tend to their bodies 365 days a year. They simply have different instruments than what I brought onto the tennis court with me. Tyson Fury is not going to bring the best instrument that he can into an Usyk rematch because he is continuing to abuse his body. And yeah, I mean, if you abuse your body for a week, is it better than doing it for a month? Yeah, but he's still not doing what he has to do to give himself the best chance to win the rematch. I doubt that Usyk is going out and getting drunk, many times.
He's not doing that, but he is partaking in a movie role, maybe signaling himself for 1 foot out the sport. He's also, as well, stated that after he takes on Tyson Fury, he might drop down back to cruiserweight and look to claim or reclaim the undisputed titles at cruiserweight. What does that do for his legacy when maybe there's more to do at heavyweight? Should he wish to stay there?
My sense is that dropping down to cruiserweight does absolutely nothing for his legacy. We know that at one point in time, he was the best cruiserweight in the world.
Hmm.
He went up to heavyweight, had what I thought was a pretty shaky start, but then righted the ship and looked wonderful in beating Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury. And he did what he had to do against Dubois. Going back to cruiserweight, what's he going to do? Who's he going to fight? And yeah, if he loses a cruiserweight, that just muddles the waters, muddies the waters, whatever metaphor you want to use. So I'd rather see him stay at heavyweight for as long as he feels comfortable there and then retire.
Very last, I just want to touch on now the case has been dealt with regarding Ryan Garcia and his ban for performance enhancing substances, and that sees most notably him being banned for a period of a year, as well as other sanctions that have been imposed on him, and as well he has to submit to further stringent drugs testing in the period out of the ring. A lot of people, well, mixed reviews on this, but a lot of people in the boxing industry not too happy with that ban because of the length of time that he's been suspended for there. I wonder how you feel about that situation.
I think that the New York State Athletic Commission mishandled the matter from the start,
Hmm.
which isn't surprising since the person who orchestrated it from the commission side was a lawyer. I believe his name was David Mossberg, who knows very, very little about the sport and business of boxing or PED testing. I actually wrote a long article about this titled Ryan Garcia and the New York State Athletic Commission that was posted on the sweetscience.com. Anybody listening to this can certainly go to the Sweet Science or Google it and read the article. First, I don't think Ryan Garcia should have been allowed to fight. The commission had notice in advance that he was acting very erratically. And the proof of the pudding that he shouldn't have been allowed to fight was that he then blew off weight, made a mockery of the proceedings, and tested positive for a performance-enhancing drug afterwards, just because somebody is physically fit to fight and wins a fight does not mean that they are psychologically fit to fight. And if you look at what has happened to Ryan Garcia since the fight, including his arrest in Beverly Hills and being held, I believe, for several nights for psychiatric evaluation, tells you that that fight shouldn't have happened. Beyond that, the New York Commission didn't have a proper hearing. They negotiated what I believe is a settlement that was too light. If you look at the components of the settlement, first, the decision was changed to no contest, which I think is appropriate. Second, Ryan was fined $10,000, which is the maximum amount that the commission can fine somebody without consent. So that was appropriate. Then you get into problems. The New York Commission trumpeted the fact that they had, forfeited Ryan Garcia's purse, which was roughly $1.2 million. But that money goes to Golden Boy. Golden Boy is Ryan Garcia's promoter. And I would speculate, like to differentiate between I know and what I would speculate. I would speculate that there was some understanding with Golden Boy that they would give this money back to Ryan, subject to any profit sharing claim that Devin Haney might have with regard to it. Fourth, to my way of thinking, 1 year is not long enough. That means missing maybe one fight. I think 2 years would have been much more appropriate. And the drug testing provision they put into the agreement is a sham, a total sham. It says that Ryan Garcia has to submit one clean urine test to the commission, to the commission's satisfaction before he gets his license back on April 20, 2025. There is no requirement as to who does the testing, no requirement as to when the test is, no requirement as to what the test is for. That means, and we're speaking hypothetically now, Ryan Garcia could take banned performance-enhancing drugs for 9 months, build up his core strength, cycle off, and then choose somebody, who's not as stringent, even as VADA, and say, okay, I want you to test me, come back clean, send the results to the New York State Athletic Commission, and you're telling me that's satisfactory? That's just a joke, and it shows how badly David Mossberg orchestrated this settlement. And I should add, the acting executive director of the New York State Athletic Commission now is Matt Delaglio. He came after Kim Sumbler, who finally left the position after the Garcia-Haney debacle. So Kim Sumbler left, Matt Delaglio is the acting executive director. And I think he's a good public servant. He works hard, he understands the sport and business of boxing. I think that he's honest. But at the commissioner level, the New York State Athletic Commission is a farce. The commission is supposed to have 5 commissioners. They only have 4. One of the seats is open. And of those 4, there is virtually no understanding of the sport and business of boxing among them. Not one of them even went to the fight between Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney. The commission, and I might add, they didn't vote on the decision-making process, which is really what they should do. I mean, what's a commission for, other than to pay people to go to the fights occasionally on fight night, their per diem, and give them a hotel room and free meals and a front row seat for the fight. I mean, it just was not properly handled. So could have been handled worse, but it could have been handled a lot better.
Given the short length of time that the ban has been handed out, do you anticipate that Ryan might take a fight in another jurisdiction? We know that years back, I think it was, there was planning to do some sort of exhibition, I think, at one point. But do you anticipate that he could have some sort of fight elsewhere?
First, I'm not sure Ryan is in any state of mind to have any kind of fight in another jurisdiction. My sense is that most reputable jurisdictions would honor the New York suspension and consent order and not host a Ryan Garcia fight. Uh, and look, again, the top priority here is that Ryan Garcia is a young man who needs help. And right now, he's not getting the kind of help he needs. And that's evident from his conduct.
We'll leave that there, Thomas. Got nothing left to offer you today, but I'm sure I will do for another iteration. Thank you so much for speaking to Seconds Out. I look forward to our next conversation.